Hi everybody, my name is David and this is All Things Sacred. So today I'm going to go over my notes that I took that I wanted to share with everyone in the commentary for the reading of the Chandi, the Devi Mahatmyam. I'm going to read these notes verbatim and then I'm going to give commentary as I go along and read them with each one because they're a little bit of a comprehensive notes, but they could be a little bit more in depth. I just use them as pointers to what I wanted to talk about. I'm not going to go into any of the actual quotes about from the Chandi, from the work itself, from the text, from the 700 verses, but I'm going to do that in the next video. All right, so one sec. And here they are. So the Chandi, the Devi Mahatmyam, is part of a larger text called the Markandeya Purana. This could kind of be told, you could tell this when you're reading the text. At the very beginning, it's being introduced from people who aren't involved in the text at all. So there's these two characters who are part of this larger text, the Markandeya Purana, which is one of the Puranas about the various ages and the lords of those ages. And we can see that at the very end of the Devi Mahatmyam, this becomes an important point because it talks about the Manu of the next age, who was born, or the rebirth of the king Surata from the story of the Devi Mahatmyam. And the Devi Mahatmyam then is the story of the king and the merchant being told the stories of the goddess by the sage in the woods. The Chandi is likely older than the Markandeya Purana, as there is historical evidence of it appearing with far more frequency than the larger text. In addition, its placement in the text is awkward and feels as though it were added in. To this effect, it also resembles the Bhagavad Gita in many ways, such as the aforementioned point of it being part of a larger text, and in addition to it having also 700 verses exactly. This was likely done after the fact, to emphasize its importance, as it is a very important and beautiful retelling or telling of the Devi story. And so the Devi Mahatmyam, the story, the glory of the goddess, and the tale of her exploits, the destruction of the Asuras, is found outside of the Markandeya Purana. This text is found in a lot of places, a lot more than the Markandeya Purana, which isn't the most popular of the Puranas at all. And with the Markandeya Purana not really being about the goddess except for this point, and this point having 700 verses exactly like the Bhagavad Gita, it is really believed that this was added into the work after the fact, a Shakti text added into this greater text, and that it was fit to have 700 verses exactly, so that it did resemble the Bhagavad Gita. And you know, there's a lot of comparisons that could be made. You can hold them next to each other, and you know, they're very similar in their, again, importance as well. And as well, since this isn't a text, the Markandeya Purana isn't a text about the goddess, for the most part, this is the only part, it does appear rather awkwardly and kind of in your face. But there's nothing wrong with it being added into the text. It's a story that was being shared on its own. It's just, these are just the facts of it. You know, this is the history of the text. So, there's the three stories, right? There's the story of the king and the merchant. I'm not sure, I don't really talk about them too much. The king Surata and the merchant Samadhi, who were both dispossessed by their kingdom or their family, and have come to the woods seeking why they exist in this delusive world. They meet the sage Medas, whose name means wisdom, who tells them of the goddess and shows them kind of like where this delusion comes from. They ask, who is this goddess Maya, Mahamaya? And, it turns the story away from, them being in delusion into what they can do to get out of delusion. Instead of looking at the negatives, they're turned toward, the glory of the goddess, who is able to both, bring us into delusion and bring us out of delusion. I'm going to talk about this in one of the notes. There's a lot of dichotomy that goes on in the presentation of the Devi as a whole, because she is a representation of something that transcends duality. But this next note says that the three stories are framed in the larger story of the king and the merchant, who are representations of different aspects of ourself. When we come into the story, we are a lot like the king and the merchant when they're lacking. They don't have all that they want, and they're confused about their situation. Sorry, that's my kitty. And they're looking for wisdom. They're looking for guidance. They're looking for a way to understand their situation, to understand themselves. And they've, one of the lines in relation to the king Suratha is that he was overthrown by inferior force, and he's been dispossessed by those who are weaker than him. And we are in many ways like the king when we enter the story, because as as an infinite being, as a soul, that exists within us, we become overthrown by the ego and all the ego's desires and passions and all the thoughts that are inferior truly to our true nature, but are able to overcome us. And we're left in this state where we need to seek the guidance of Guru, the guidance of the true beloved divine friend. And so the king and the merchant, who are representations of different aspects of ourselves. That of fulfilling our dharma and of achieving moksha and final liberation. So these are notes, so it's not... So what I'm saying there is the king is a representation of us, having unfulfilled dharma, but trying to find what it is that we're supposed to give our time and our effort, our work towards. What he prays to Kali for at the end, what he prays to the Devi for at the end, Chandi rather, is a kingdom to rule over in this life and the next. And that's, a very great symbol of our dharma. And so he's a representation of us not fulfilling our dharma, but with the potential to fulfill our dharma. And the other side is samadhi. That's the name of the merchant. And samadhi is a state of super consciousness that one enters after years of meditation and personal development. And so even though he has the name samadhi and should be a representation of that one being liberated from the worldly attachments that causes so much pain and suffering, at the beginning of the story, too, he represents our disconnection from that samadhi, our inability to tap into that, which is our true nature. It's his very name, and he's not able to experience that because he's trapped in the whirlpool of delusion, just like we all are when we are raised and come up in this maya, in this play, this game, this lila, this delusive world, this world that causes us so much delusion. Within their story, they are told the Devi story by a sage whose name literally means wisdom, and I mentioned that just moments ago. The end of their story shows the results of true devotional work and the right way to take the wisdom found in the text. So it is fully encapsulated what it is that we should do. Not only do we have these wonderful stories, these wonderful hymns, these great battle sequences that are dedicated to the goddess, but we also have in the telling of the merchant and the king what it is that we should do with this wisdom, how it is that we should take these stories that are being told to us and apply them into our lives. And that is through propitiation, through acts of devotion, through a showing of love for this great and unique and immense force that encompasses all aspects of our life, good and bad. If we can learn to honor this, then we will be given all the boons that we are seeking from the goddess herself. And that's made very clear throughout the text that propitiation is necessary. The next note says that the battlefields found in the three stories are allegories for the internal and external conflicts that we have to face on the field of our bodies and lives. The Asuras are therefore psychological and external traits and issues that trap us in negative and delusive thinking that causes harm to ourselves and to others. The Devi's mount and weapons represent virtuous actions and perspectives that are granted from and lead to the grace of the Devi herself. The Devi is the supreme and transcendent consciousness whose body is the cosmos. So there's a few pieces there. Much like the Bhagavad Gita, the battlefields, are allegories for our life, for the battles that we have to face inside of ourselves and outside of ourselves. So that's a lot like the Bhagavad Gita. The Asuras, I say, are psychological and external issues. So these are the obstacles. The Asuras, the demons that the Devi is fighting, are the obstacles that we face along the way, and that lead us to these negative and delusive thought processes. They're engaging in battle with the Devi, and the Devi is their truest self. Their greatest love, and there's even points when they're lusting after the goddess, and then the moment they can't have her, they want to destroy her. Their delusion is apparent, and that's a great symbol, especially with a lot of their names, if you look at them individually, of how they are different traits that we trap ourselves with that it make us be far away from the grace of the divine self. The Devi's mountain weapons, I say, are virtuous actions and perspectives. These are the ways that we battle, that we use her force when we turn to her. Propitiation is part of all of this, as represented by the hymns. But when we offer those hymns and we take the advice that's given to us internally, then our actions and our perspectives become those attacks, those responses to those obstacles that are blocking us, and allow us to gain something a little better. We have to replace all our negative thinking and thought patterns with positive ones, and negative actions with positive ones. This isn't always this will get us to a certain point. Eventually we have to eradicate both good and bad so that we can sit in true silence, but this is the way that we get there, is by doing things that are better for us. It's pretty obvious when you start working it and you start doing things that are good. Have this sense of an internal moral that just rises from within. This moral compass. How much happier your life is. But there is still a subtle barrier that one needs to overcome if they're to start experiencing more transcendent states. And that's the Devi herself. That's why I say there, the Devi is the supreme and transcendent consciousness whose body is the cosmos. Because when we're able to actually, keep up the battle and really have trust that, we can do this, that we can overcome with the aid of the goddess or the god, with the aid of Brahman, the aid of the true self, then we can come to this state of experiencing the Devi as the supreme consciousness, as the transcendent consciousness. And a whole new life appears for one when the grace of the Devi is offered because of all of these attempts to gain her attention and garner her favor. The next note says that the stories go back and forth between hymns of praise and the telling of the battle. These represent the two sides of the Devi as auspicious and terrifying. This idea of dichotomy is presented throughout the text. Though she herself is in no way evil, the Devi is after all the mother of everything. For that reason, her destruction of the Asuras is in no way a hateful or vengeful thing. In the end, she frees them from their delusion as they are destroyed by her weapons. So this, the first point that the stories go back and forth, there's the three hymns. I believe they're called I mentioned this last time, I still didn't look it up. The Brahma Stuti, the Aparajita Stuti, and the Narayana Stuti. These are the three hymns to the goddess, and then and they're told in between back and forth with the telling of the battle. And these really present two different goddesses. The hymns are full of beautiful philosophical treatises on what the goddess really is, how she encapsulates all things, but she's also transcendent of everything, and how she is, they call her beauty and goodness and even delusion and error, but they really do ascribe to her. They're very flowery. It's like adorning her with necklaces and garlands is just this recital of just the hearing, even just the the knowledge of what those hymns say. And then in between that, you jump from this very beautiful and lovely figure to a very horrifying figure who, if you were on the other side of her sword, it would be a very terrifying place to be. But who becomes a real protectress when you are calling to her for aid, and this is what you get. So, the light changes when you could really understand that she's doing all of this just to protect you. If you don't understand that, then she can be quite a fearsome sight. Just a little personal anecdote. I really have the belief, I read somewhere, I heard somewhere, a friend told me actually, that if you, actually I don't remember where I got this information from, but it was somehow put into my head that if you worship Kali, then she'll take like all of the problems, all the things that you're going to face in your entire lifetime, and if you really dedicate your heart to her, then within a year's time, she will make you go through all of those trials so that you could come out on the other side, at least closer to liberation, if not liberated. And, it was fearsome. It was, the past year, I really believed this and gave a lot of myself to her. And it was one of the most difficult years of my life, but I went through it with this center of compassion, of love, of care, even though I was seeing, dark sides of loved ones and of strangers and of myself. I continue to offer at her feet my whole life. And I really feel like this past year, even though it was difficult during the time, even during the time I didn't feel like I wasn't regretting it at all. And I don't regret it because I've come out, more solid in my understanding of myself and of life in general. And so I just wanted to bring that anecdote because it's terrifying. It's a terrifying experience to have all your preconceptions and delusions smashed before you. And you watch as your life changes and your outlook changes and you change. And you lose this like sense of self. I don't even feel as though I am the same person who went into all of this. I don't even feel as a person in much the same way when I entered this relationship with my Divine Mother. So this idea of dichotomy is presented throughout the text because she's the mother of all. She's not evil, and that's true. That's true. I talked about that in the last video, that she's shown in two very different lights, and I just said a bit of words on that. There is the idea that when she touches the Asuras with her weapons, it talks about this in the text itself, that she's liberating them. That this is because of their karmic situation. The only, the greatest liberation they have, for anyone really, is if they're in a negative state, is to be destroyed by the Devi herself. Because coming in contact with her, a vision of her, even if it's a horrifying one, even if it's drawing one to death, because she could be the force of delusion that drives one to kill themselves, even, that if you can contact her directly and see through the delusion of the experience to the goddess behind it, she will liberate you in that moment. She will give you freedom. And that's what the Asuras got, because she had to take embodied form to fight them. And so when her weapons destroyed them, they weren't just killed, they were liberated. They were freed from their negative state. So charita, the word charita means, it's like chapter, essentially. There's 3 sections and there's 3 charitas. This next note says the 3 charitas are presided over by 3 forms of the goddess. These are Mahakali, Mahalakshmi, and Mahasaraswati. Although, interestingly, the opening mantras relate to the goddesses in reverse. So the opening line, Om Klim, should be related to Mahakali in the first charita, but we have... I believe it's Om Shrim for Mahasaraswati, and Om Shrim in the middle for Mahalakshmi doesn't change because there's only 3. I'm not really certain why they're reversed. It kind of creates this like really beautiful interrelation of the goddesses, to kind of show that they are connected in many ways, but I can't speak with much certainty onto why the mantras at the opening of each charita relate in reverse. But these are three major forms of the goddess, and I'm going to talk about them here in the next few notes. The three forms of the goddess represent the three gunas in creation, so Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva, or Tamas, Rajas, Sattva, in that order. Likewise, the Asuras in the three stories are reflections of this. So the gunas are really important for understanding this world, because they're the three modes of being that we eventually have to transcend fully. But their darkness, a fiery nature, and the goodness, the balanced nature, though that's a very weird way of putting it. More, I think maybe you might say ignorance for tamas, and passion for rajas, and goodness for sattvas are the three best ways, probably, three of the best ways to explain what the gunas are. These are so important. You could look at it on a scientific level, and you could break it down to atoms and electrons, and how these are all, everything is interacting on that level. But I like to look at it on a much more psychological level, because that's a lot more applicable to the individual. And so calling it ignorance, passion, and goodness really give us a great understanding of the three modes of our own being. And we have to be careful. We have to recognize where it is that we're at, and we have to be careful also as well in this modern age. Tamas, obviously, ignorance. That's something nobody wants. That darkness, clearly, that's something that people want to stay away from. But we've taken this idea of passion as well, and we've really applied a lot of positive connotations to it. That a passionate person is a good person, but that's, they're in different sections. They're different modes of being. A passionate person is one who is driven and ruled by their passions and their desires. Whereas a good person is a balanced individual who is able to think of others, who isn't ruled by their passions, and more so is in control of their ego. The ego is still a very big thing for one who exists in sattva. And, it's that final subtle barrier that you need to transcend to be able to exist outside of the gunas, to experience transcendent states. But one who exists in sattva, nonetheless, is still a lot closer to that experience, that transcendent state, than one who is in rajas. Because one who is in rajas is still so focused on the world. And tamas, obviously, too. But one who is in rajas, they're focused mostly in the wrong direction until they learn that they have to transcend that. And that's often because one who is ruled by the passions is one who is prone to anger or violence, and a lot of negativity, worry, and stress as well. I say that the Asuras in the three stories are also reflections. So Mahakali, Kali is dark. Kali is I talk about it here in a sec, so I won't go into it too much. She represents Mahamaya. Actually, I'm just going to read the notes because the notes explain it. So, But I just want to say, in a relation to the goddesses, so Mahakali would be Tamas, Mahalakshmi would be Rajas, and Mahasaraswati would be Sattva, and these are obviously purified forms of these traits. they're the goddess as these traits. I say likewise, the Asuras as well are reflections of all these things. That the Asuras in each story symbolize Tamas, Rajas, and Sattva. So Madhu and Kaitaba in the first story are Tamas. Mahashashura and all his generals are Rajas in the second story, the second Charita, and especially Shumba and Nishumba are a representation of Sattvic Ashur traits in the third Charita. And they really, Shumba and Nishumba give great insight into how even one needs to transcend the Sattvic state as well. One sec here. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. My video is getting a little choppy. 24 minutes, that's doing pretty good. Um, and I gave a little bit of an intro into how the goddesses themselves are representations of the three gunas, and I will get into that a little bit more specific in the next video. So all of you take care, have a great night, and Jema.